Void in LeBron's heart.
Here we go. We're recording.
Oh,
Speaking of LeBron, we're doing Sexy Beast today. We're doing a movie, not one movie. We're actually doing Jonathan Glazer. We're gonna try not to glaze too much, as the kids say nowadays, on Jonathan Glazer.
is that a thing? Kids say glaze a lot.
If you're glazing someone, it implies you're like, it's a gross term. Just use your imagination on what glaze is, and that's what glazing is. You're like complimenting something and going off on something so much because you love it. Anyway, Jonathan Glazer is the director that we're going to be focused on. I am going to steal the microphone away from Nolan because we can't discuss music videos with him. And Jonathan Glazer directed a number of music videos before he came into directing feature-length films, as well as commercials. And his commercials, they hit. They're pretty awesome. You watched all of his commercials, Nolan?
I watched the majority of them. I didn't make it through all of them, but yeah, I got through quite a few. I didn't see most of his newer ones. He made some more recent ones for Audi, Apple, Prada. I didn't watch any of those, but
yeah, but the late 90s into the early 2000s, he's got some great ads. But anyway, we are here to talk about movies, not music videos or commercials. Maybe one day we'll talk about those, but that's not what we're doing right now. So without further ado, let's talk about Sexy Beast, which is Jonathan Glazer's first feature-length film that came out in 2000. Unless you wanted to give some background on the poor boy.
Yeah, I mean, he started out directing commercials. He worked for Academy Commercials, some production company in London. I think the most notable ones are the Guinness ones, which were also my favorite ones. I would recommend them. They're nice and short. But yeah, beyond that, I mean, we've talked about some directors before that sort of started in the more commercial sphere and transitioned later into being feature filmmakers. With the bridge for Glazer being some of the work on these music videos. I don't really understand music videos, so.
No. We're not doing music videos. You made it clear we can't talk about those.
We can talk about them. I just can't objectively talk about it. That's all.
No, we've got our David Lynch glasses on. We're ready to plow ahead into the warm, sunny days. Massive
Yeah.
sun. Cool. So Sexy Beast. Sexy Beast is a movie that came out in 2000. It's a black comedy crime film with the likes of Ray Winstone, Ben Kingsley, Ian McShane. Yeah, it's called Sexy Beast. It's a cool movie. You could bill it as like a hangout movie, I guess, a crime movie, despite there not being all that much crime that actually happens. Most of the crime is just like talked about. And I mean, there's a couple people that, get killed. But at any rate, it's got one of the cooler, what's it called, like opening sequences to a movie. And yeah, there's some pretty like unexpected scenes, I would say. The movie definitely has that sort of it has that aesthetic and that like plot where something is happening and you're just like, is this actually what is going on? Like it's unbelievable that the director just chose to just go off and do this for this extended period of time. Yeah, I don't know if you wanted to discuss this this hilarious man behind you and his role in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously some pretty heavy inspiration drawn from Long Good Friday with regards to Ben Kingsley's character in Sexy Beast, where he predominantly for the first 30 to 45 minutes of this movie acts the same way as the protagonist from Long Good Friday, where he just comes in and is an unabashed outpouring of curses.
Just the biggest asshole.
Yeah, just belittles and berates Ray Winstone for this first third to half of the movie. What's Bob Hoskins? That's who Bob Hoskins. Yeah, he's similar to Bob Hoskins, like, menacing, angry mob boss character. But the plot is really straightforward. Ray Winstone plays a guy named Gal, and he hangs out in his Spanish villa where he's retired. He lives with his wife and another couple that he's friends with, and they just chill by his pool and drink. And then it's interrupted by Ben Kingsley, who is just a mob boss who's like, "We need to hire you back, Gal. We need you back for one last ride, one last job." Things don't go well. Ray Winstone and his wife and his friends eventually kill him because he's just a crazy person. And then in order to cover it up that he killed him, he decides to do the job. He travels to London. The gangsters in London are like, "Yeah, obviously you must have done something to Ben Kingsley because he didn't return." And then they do the job, which is really truncated. Like, the actual heist is very, very short. Like, it's literally sped up. Like, they shot the whole heist and then they just speed up the footage to get through it. And then he returns to Spain and retires. I think he gets paid 10 quid for the job. Like, instead of being paid well, he's literally just given a tenner and, like, told to piss off. Yeah, and then he lives not so happily ever after, but the implication being that these gangsters will never stop showing up. There is no retiring from a life of crime.
Yeah, further reinforced by the fact that he hears Don's voice in his head, and then he's like, "Shut up, Don." That's like
So funny.
the end of the movie. There's also some rather like abstract, ethereal stuff in this, like in the opening sequence when a boulder tumbles down the Spanish mountainside and nearly crushes him, but lands in his pool instead.
Yeah,
There's like there's like he sees visions of the devil as well. Are the visions of the devil also the like Donnie Darko rabbit looking thing, or is that something else?
No, I no, I'm not sure what you're. It's just a different thing if that's what you're asking. I don't.
There's some fun stuff shown in here. At any rate, like you said, the movie is like both a crime movie, but it's also like somewhat off kilter because it truncates it, and the movie is not about crime. It's about something else and exploring Gal's character and his inability to get away from this life and just kind of like relax with his wife and this other couple.
I mean, he wants to retire, but it's unclear if the like devil dreams are his desire to return to the life of crime or the fact that it'll always catch up with him. I think it's the latter, not the former. But it's been a while since I've seen it, so I don't actually recall. I mean, this is like easily of Glazer's 4 feature films, the least stylistic and probably the least deep, but easily the most fun, because it is just like an unabashed gangster film filled with profanity and jokes. I mean, it is a very humorous movie, and Ben Kingsley is like deeply menacing but also funny as the primary antagonist.
Yeah, you're both rooting that someone slaps him in the face, but you're also rooting for him to get more screen time because he just eats every scene that he's in. Cool movie, good movie, would recommend for sure if you've never seen it, and I'll probably be revisiting it soon. On to, did you have any more for Sexy Beast?
No, I think that
cool. Next up is Birth. Came out in 2004, starring the likes of Nicole Kidman, Lauren Bacall, Cameron Bright, Danny Houston, Peter Stormare, Ted Levine. Yeah, a really, really solid cast. Oh wow, Alexander Desplat did the music. Nice. So this movie is, oh boy, a lot of his movies just telling you like the plot is just obviously doesn't really do service to the like metaphor or metaphors that he's going for, but it's in New York City. The opening sequence is shot behind and above a man who is going on a run with a hood on, so you never see who it is, but he goes on this really long run opening sequence, and then he collapses underneath a bridge and dies from assumedly a heart attack. I forget exactly what it is that kills him, but it's the running that kills him, the exercise.
Yeah, exercise is bad.
Exactly, that's the takeaway there. And so his wife, whose name is Anna, she a couple years later is engaged to Danny Houston, and they come across this boy whose name is Sean, and he basically gets in contact with Anna and is like, yo, I'm your dead husband, Sean. And she's like, what the hell is going on? No, you're not. This is weird. And through a series of other events, basically Sean the kid attempts to prove that he is her dead husband. Yeah.
It isn't.
The kid?
It isn't her husband.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, because then it isn't.
Because the kid doesn't know that Sean, the husband, was cheating on his wife, Anna, which then like shatters the kid's illusion of him being Sean.
Well, also because the lady that Sean was having an affair with is the one that allowed Sean to, like, this thing with the letters at the end. The kid just read all of these intimate letters,
right,
to learn about Anna.
Because it's implied that he like dug them up and read them, right?
It's just explicitly told to you.
All right.
Yeah, then she gets married.
And they live happily never after. Yeah, the movie is very clearly a metaphor for Anna struggling with the loss of her husband and struggling with still loving him and the void that's in his life. So basically, this kid that enters her life with the chance that this could be her dead husband basically opens the box of memories and emotions that she had closed off for the span of time after he had passed away, and she was trying to move on. But the ending of the movie makes it clear that she is not over him and the love that she had, and it's quite a sad ending because she is unable to overcome it. It's pretty clear that she isn't going to be able to overcome it, at least in my mind. That's the lasting message.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting part is the boy, like, Sean never tells Anna about the letters.
Right.
Like, she is just willing to believe it's her reincarnated husband, and it's the boy that like sets her straight by being like, no, like, it's not true. I'm not actually him. I was confused. And she's like, oh, okay.
Right. A child is the one that kind of shatters the illusion for her, despite him also being the one that cast the spell.
Well, via the manipulation of Clara.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's a really well written movie. For the most part, I think it's pretty well directed as well. Visually speaking, it's pretty simple. A lot of the flourishes from the use of editing, and then obviously just content-wise, what's included makes it sort of an anti-fairy tale. There's something about a lot of the staging and the use of lighting that makes it feel ominous, despite the fact that it is oftentimes, because of the use of music, sort of playful. That's why I call it an anti-fairy tale.
I tried to
because
explain that to Anna while we were watching it, but I was like, this is like unsettling. Like it makes me feel like it's a horror movie, but it's not a horror movie. She was like, I don't find it scary. I find it contemplative. And I was like, yeah, it's contemplative, but there's underscores of scariness to it, like voyeuristic.
yeah, and I think that's a great example of the way in which Glazer as a director is able to convey a very specific type of feeling that is supposed to be attributed to Nicole Kidman's Anna character, and the way in which like the loss of someone you love permanently impacts you forever. It was written with Jean-Claude Carrière, who had a very long working relationship with Louis Buñuel, who we've mentioned a couple times before on the podcast. I think they wrote this over a couple of years, but I think it's really well written. I think it's well directed. For the most part, the supporting cast works well around Nicole Kidman, who just has a great performance as a love lost woman. And yeah, the ending is great, where she marries Danny Houston and looks happy, but then clearly is not. Like even at the end, they're married on a beach. It looks like she wants to just like run into the ocean, and then that's what causes her to like break down and cry.
Yeah, the final shot is Danny Houston sprinting frantically down beach dunes to try to like scoop her up, and there's no dialogue, it's only music that's played over her just being devastated looking out at the water, and somewhat implied that she may or may not be trying to like go drown herself in the ocean. It's never explicitly said, but yeah, I thought it was a pretty good movie. I wouldn't say it was perfect. I wouldn't really call it great either. I thought it was good. Most of that I think comes down to the writing. For me was good, and Nicole Kidman's performance was really excellent, but there were some things that kind of like fell apart for me.
What?
What?
Like what?
Some of the contrivances I didn't feel like were either as fleshed out as they could have been, or I don't want to say like made clearer, but like something better could have happened with them. Like I didn't really like the fact that Sean just like goes back to school and is just like, yeah, and I go talk to people now and like they say I'm gonna be okay. And I'm Sean now. I don't know, it didn't really feel like that like string was tied up well or like was well thought out to the point where they could have done something more with the kid, I guess.
To feed more into the like supernatural elements of the movie.
Either supernatural or something else. Like it just felt like they had an idea for what they wanted with the kid, and then it got to the end and they were like, oh yeah, he's just gonna go back to being a kid.
Kids say the darndest things.
It is funny how many times throughout the movie like adults look to him and they're like, what's wrong with you, why are you doing this? And he just turns and looks at them. I'm Sean. They're like, what? Why are you saying this? Don't you see you're upsetting? I'm just Sean.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's not a perfect movie. The end being unsatisfying, there is a disconnect between the emotion that is portrayed by Kidman at the end of heartbreak and the dissatisfaction you're describing of like narratively things not really coming together. But I think that's pretty intentional. It's just like the way it leaves you disappointed doesn't feel like the way it's meant to leave you disappointed.
Yes.
Because it's meant to be like more devastating, right?
Yeah.
Like it's supposed to be like highly affecting in the devastation that Anna's character is supposed to feel. But it's not like this movie is like very over the top. It's not meant to be like over dramatic. So in that way, that feeling of like slight disappointment, I think kind of matches what they were going for. Like I think it accomplishes what they wanted it to. It just isn't like it's not like a big emotion. It's like a much smaller loss that is felt.
It's more understated, but yeah, I think that like the emotional tone could have been like tethered a little bit better. I did want to highlight though, there were a number of shots that I really enjoyed. There's the one where they show up late to the play or the opera. Who gives a shit what it is? They're walking in late, and it's shot from the perspective of the stage, and they're like coming in, and they are sitting in the middle part of the middle part of a row in the audience, and so people have to like get up for them to walk through, and as they're walking in, Danny Houston comes in and sits, and Nicole Kidman follows, and then it zooms in on her face, and it like holds her face looking out at the play itself, so she's looking directly into your eyes, and it holds that shot for like, I don't know, 2 minutes straight. It's like very, very unsettling, but also like thought provoking, and I really enjoyed that scene a lot. Like that scene definitely just sticks with me. The most dramatic sequence in the movie is when Danny Houston and Nicole Kidman are going to be married in the like apartment that they live in, or the house, whatever you want to call it, in New York City, and the kid is seated behind Danny Houston. They're like, oh, we need to have him a part of the wedding in order for like the spell to be broken. And he like keeps kicking his chair, and Danny Houston's getting like pissed off, and he turns around and is like, yo, you gotta stop that, bro. And then he just like stops, and then he goes back and kicks his chair. Like this kid is like 8 years old, right? He kicks his chair again, and Danny Houston just gets up and erupts, like tries to like just smack the kid, and he's like held back by a number of people, and he's like, I'm good, get your hands off me, get your damn hands off me. And then they're like, all right, and then he just explodes again, pushes like the Steinway piano so it blocks a hallway, grabs the kid and goes over the piano, and then starts spanking the shit out of him like on a chair until they like separate them from one another. So like that scene is great because the kid basically shows Danny Houston for what he is, first of all, but then
spoiled little child.
Yeah, but then also it's further damning like the end as well, because then Nicole Kidman ends up with him, who is, well, I guess I wouldn't say he's necessarily a worse version of Sean, because Sean was just cheating on Nicole Kidman then. So It's pretty devastating, like no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, I mean her willingness to marry at the end obviously has nothing to do with love.
Yeah.
And more about just like, I need to marry for the sake of security, contentment.
Right. Well, also that point is pushed to its apex because Danny Houston like asked to date her a number of times, and she's like, no. And then he asks to marry her a number of times, like every year, and she's like, no, until finally she says yes. And he literally comes out and tells an audience this, like when he's giving a speech. Danny Houston, excellent villain in everything that he's in. Not that he's a villain in this movie, but he is villainous, that's for sure.
Yeah, he always has that. There's just some darkness but behind the surface.
Sniveling. I definitely don't have anything more to say about Birth. I really enjoyed the movie though.
Welcome to Birth. This movie did get like poor reviews when it was released.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Audiences didn't really like it. Critics didn't really like it.
Well, I mean, it does involve a woman who literally is just contemplating like doing physical things with a child. So that definitely is off-putting.
Roger Ebert gave it a good review. He knew.
Roger Ebert is God.
Oh,
I'm kidding. So next up, we've got Under the Skin, a 2013 movie. This was featured on my favorites list. Was it on yours?
No.
Okay. Just immediately fuck this movie. Oh man. Oh, that's good stuff.
Just throwing shade for no reason.
This movie is based on a novel by Michel Faber. What? Why are you making that face? It's literally based on a novel by the same title.
I knew we'd get into this. I knew this would happen.
This is what the liars at Wikipedia are saying.
So the reason I'm like dismissing that even more is because Zone of Interest is also based on a novel, but Jonathan Glazer, like I think he like looked at the book once before writing the movie. Like it being based on it is like so loose. Like technically there was a book with the same name.
I mean, the plot vaguely seems to be similar.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose.
Like the premise is definitely the same.
Yeah,
What's your
you
issue with
could.
saying that it's based on it?
It's, there's something about like it should be noted that when an artist who is a filmmaker adapts a book to the screen, the work as an adaptation is just they don't really care what was in the book. They just
Right.
read it and they're like, "Oh, I can kind of make that story, but it'll be my story," as opposed to I faithfully adapted the work.
Right. I mean,
Like Scorsese's someone that reads the book and then is like, "I'm gonna make that book as a good movie." Jonathan Glazer's like, yeah, I have a story idea based on that book, and then rubs his hands together and cracks out something completely different.
yeah, I mean, I haven't read the book.
It's more extreme, I guess, in the Zone of Interest, which is just barely even an adaptation of the book.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be the case. This is an A24 movie, as well, worth noting. This movie, I am sure, did not do well. In fact, it definitely did not. Nope, box office failure. Grossed $7 million on a budget of 13 mil. What? Why are you making that face?
I don't think. I don't know how you would ever market this movie.
Oh. Yeah, where to begin with this movie? So the movie takes place in Scotland, and a wild Scarlett Johansson basically picks up men and does things to them back at her place. That's accurate.
Yeah, technically true.
Or is it back at her place, or is it in the van itself? Doesn't she take them back to her place? Yeah.
Yeah, she did. She takes them in the van back to her like shitty cottage slash house.
And at this shitty cottage slash house, the men see strange visions and then are like eaten by a void, basically.
Yeah, literal liquid black abyss. The void itself.
Yeah, and Scarlett Johansson is not of this world.
Yeah. I mean, this one compared to the other two, which follow, I would say, very linear, like narrative paths. This one is just completely off the path. There's no real narrative to follow. It's kind of just a series of scenes. Each one is kind of just like the encapsulation of a singular abduction slash absorption. It's unclear if the alien slash Scarlett Johansson is there to like study humans or understand humans or simply to consume them to survive. It's never quite made clear.
Mm-hmm. So, in addition to reinforce that point as well, later on in the movie, after like all of the like pickups and like consumption of these men, she goes out to like the Scottish Highlands and abandons the van and basically tries to eat something but spits it out. Long story short, she and this other guy become involved. She stares at her own body in the mirror. He picks her up and moves her over a puddle, and then they try to have sex, but then she stops and like looks at her genitals. And then the end of the movie is her wandering in a forest, and a logger is oh god, she's wandering in the forest, goes to like this kind of like warm house, like cottage thing, and she's resting there, and she wakes up and a guy is doing bad things to her. So she runs away and he tries to go do more bad things to her in the forest. And the movie ends with him tearing her skin off and she doesn't have like anything underneath her skin. And he basically like freaks out and goes back to get fuel because he's a logger, and he burns her body up. It is a movie that most people would watch and go, wow, that is a weird movie. That was a wild movie. It is definitely a wild movie, not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't explain what it wants you to think about it.
Yeah.
It's a very subjective piece of art. So in order for you to draw any sort of meaning from the nonsense you just described, you kind of have to pay attention or just, feel something at the sake of the images. I know a lot of people compared it to, or didn't compare it to, but described it either as being an examination of gender roles, being an examination of the male gaze, an examination of anti-immigration, which those are some pretty different theories. Is there one? What do you think this movie is about? Why is this one of your favorite movies?
I could definitely see the male gaze probably being like more salient than the rest. I mean, Scarlett Johansson is naked in a lot of scenes of the movie, which
That's the primary reason this movie had any audience at all.
Right, which is not the reason it is one of my favorites, to be clear. But my favorite sequences from it are when she's in the van and it's like a reverse dash cam where it's just like focused on her face while she's like driving or just like looking out at the world, because her acting conveys the fact that she is not human, and she's not human, but you don't want to acknowledge that. Like some part of you is like, this is like very strange. Like I don't really get what's going on here. As for why this is one of my favorites, I like the fact that you can interpret it in so many different ways. And I think it's also one of those movies that the more times you watch it, the more you get out of it. Especially in like certain scenes. Like for me, I see like each of the scenes as like vignettes of human nature in a lot of ways. So the reflection between or juxtaposition rather between the guy who she meets up with and like treats her well, and like gives her like a place to stay, is basically like the first person that treats her as a human and tries to treat her relatively well, I would say. And then the end is just like the worst aspect of man, who is just trying to like is assaulting her basically. And she is unable to overcome that actually because she's burned up by the man. So you could interpret the fact that it's just downright damning men, and we as men will destroy anything that we don't understand that's too scary, or too feminine or not of this world. I don't necessarily think that it's saying that. I mean, I guess the man is a logger, so he literally is destroying nature. Like that is his job. So him destroying nature and also destroying this woman that is not a woman, further emphasizes that point. But I basically I like that it is. I really like the style and how the style reflects the tone, and then how the tone reflects the very abstract, seemingly plotless nature of the film, while also being able to apply all sorts of different meanings to it. It's like a slightly more accessible version of Holy Motors in some spiritual sense, I would say.
So, how so?
Well, Holy Motors, given that that one is also like vignettes of a person living like multitudes, basically. This is like one alien's experience with humans, specifically men, and preying on men that want to have sex with the alien. Like plot wise, it's like it like makes more sense, if you will, than Holy Motors. Like the internal logic of it.
Uh, I guess so. I don't know that I agree. Who are the motorcycle people?
The motorcycle people in Under the Skin?
Yeah.
Motorcycle people.
Yeah, the whole movie, including the opening scene where a motorcyclist like kidnaps a woman and brings her to the alien and gives her the new skin to live in.
I forgot about
The
that part.
motorcyclist follows her the whole movie and
I,
like abducts other men.
right, and the last sequence is the motorcyclist looking out across a snowy field. Um, so basically, most of the movie they're helping her, and then at the end, they kind of don't really care.
I guess so. Yeah.
I forgot about that part of the movie. Vaguely, they might view her as a god, given that they like don't really understand her, but they understand. God, there's so much sound happening here. I'm so distracted.
We can take a break.
It's fine. I'm really having trouble concentrating.
I don't have a whole lot to add to this movie. I think I got something very different out of it.
What did you get out of it?
I mean, by and large, a lot of the scenes are purely there to either show you the relationship between the Scarlett Johansson creature as a predator stalking its prey, or just simply attempting to view humanity through some kind of lens, the same way that the motorcyclist is watching the alien interact with people. The motorcyclist appears to just be the audience looking for answers and collecting information, uninterested in the way that the plot plays out or whether or not these people are harmed, the same way that the alien seems to just be operating purely on a predatory and relying, its consumption of these other people, just the same way where at the end of the movie, what happens is not consensual. It's not as if, this alien has acted with any regard to consent in the way that it abducts and then completely consumes the men film. But the one exception being the disfigured man, who she leaves and doesn't, add to the void pool of death and destruction or consumption. But then the motorcyclist picks that guy up anyway, as if it's a collection of note to need to be studied. So it seems to be about some like alien version of empathy and the way in which like we learn based on what we see and how that can be dangerous because what we see, if we're seeing violence, affect us later. I don't think the movie does a very good job of like closing things out narratively, but I don't think it cares, and that's why I think it's a great movie, because it doesn't, it's more about the feeling of every scene, scene to scene. And so in its attempt to describe a certain feeling that is some kind of alien feel, almost predation, like its view on love is this view of, both predation and confusion and consumption and destruction. I don't think it's meant to necessarily be coherent. I'm sure if you ask Jonathan Glazer, in private one-on-one, maybe he could explain some deeper meaning that he actually felt he had for it. And maybe there is something in here about it, like trying to provide anti-immigration sentiment in a way that's like, isn't it foolish to hate or to other people? Because the goal of the movie, obviously, especially with the scenes with the disfigured man, is meant to be about creating connection despite having nothing in nothing, or even not understanding oneself. Because there's so many scenes where Scarlett Johansson like looks at the mirror to examine herself and doesn't recognize her own body because it is just a skin, and what is underneath it appears to not even be something that the creature itself understands. But given that there are so many like sensual scenes, the one I remember in particular is like she goes to visit a nightclub. Like, I call it sensual, not because it's like romantically sensual
It's
or like
sensory.
yeah, yes, it's um yeah, that's the one that I remember the best, and sort of as the meat and potatoes of the movie itself. As for the like nude scenes where Scarlett Johansson finally lures the men into the void, they themselves are like not particularly sexual either. I wouldn't call them scary. They're just sort of it's more like watching a creature feed than it is, watching people have sex or something.
Yeah, and it's gross. It's like, even there's another layer of grossness too, because the expectation from the men is that they're about to get their rocks off, and then they're just eaten by liquid while staring at her.
Right.
So they're devoured when they were planning on doing the devouring, basically.
Yeah, you could interpret it that way.
As a work of art, I like that it's something that pushes me to try to grapple with its potential meanings that much more. And I feel like I do get what it's doing, like, excuse me, what it's doing within the specific scenes itself. I have a better handle on the vignettes than the entire like piece. Like, I haven't quite wrapped my arms around what I think the whole piece is going for, as illustrated by me stumbling through why I like the movie when you put me on the spot by asking that.
Anymore for this minute.
We'll be right back. And we're back. Final Jonathan Glazer film. We actually spoke more about this dude than I thought we would, given that he only has 4 feature-length films. This last one came out in 2023. It's called Zone of Interest. Sorry, The Zone of Interest, which, as you pointed out, with Under the Skin, yes, it is loosely based on a novel of the same title. But as you pointed out, it has a similar premise, but it definitely does its own thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, two points to go off of. One is that of Glazer's 4 movies and why we would talk about him, other than that this is sort of a recent movie that critically did very well and won some of the awards or whatever. Sexy Beast is an otherwise fairly conventional gangster movie plot told in a very unconventional manner, where Birth is a very unconventional story told in a sort of conventional manner, and then Under the Skin is just unconventional in almost every way, but uses, the most conventional actress you could find, completely, not any meaning to throw shade on Scarlett Johansson as an actor, but just completely subverting her roles in these popular superhero movies.
It is
And
worth
then
noting that it lures you in with, hey, we got Scarlett Jo's tits in here, and then there you just lured in, and it's like, wait, this isn't the point of the movie, right? You're getting devoured by this movie.
yeah, an erotic thriller it is not, and it is all the better for it. And then yeah, the zone of interest is, it has the conventional sort of Oscar bait style plot on the surface, that it's like, oh, this is a Holocaust movie, this is about Auschwitz, and then it isn't that at all.
It's barely about Auschwitz, like barely.
I mean, it is precisely about Auschwitz, but about the operation of it without
Yes.
ever seeing the horrors perpetrated within. In fact, the movie goes to painstaking detail to look away from the horrors that the Nazis perpetrated in the camp, told most notably through the eyes of the commandant of the camp,
Mm-hmm.
Rudolf Höss. Yeah, I don't know really where to begin with this one. I mean, the plot itself is like very straightforward and almost devoid of any sort of narrative. like, I guess vaguely it's about this commandant who uh, is pleased with his promotion of being in charge of a camp, and it's sort of an idyllic setting, and only the family doesn't necessarily know what's happening, although they come to know what's happening so close by. Um, because of the gunshots and the screaming that you hear, and the smoke billowing from the furnaces.
Yeah.
I think probably my favorite scene in the movie is the one where I think it's the commandant's wife's family visits, and I forget if it's
Her mother.
yeah, who recognizes what's happening, and like she just leaves in the middle of the night, right?
She comes and initially she's like overwhelmed by how like good her daughter has it. She's like, "Oh wow, this place is so nice. Like look at all the nice things that you have. This house is great." And then there's like a scene like looking, I forget if it shows just like color of the sky and then like cuts back to her face, but she's unable to like go to sleep in the bed and like rises and departs because she knows exactly what's happening. Yeah. She's unable to live with it, so she just leaves.
But it's in terms of like visual style and cinematography, it's shot in a very sort of muted German manner.
Yeah.
This is the way a lot of German films are shot, very matter of factly without stylistic flair. Other than the what would you call those? The scenes that are in black and white, the like overexposed ones. Perhaps that's all the more there is to it. Just the overexposed scenes in black and white that are meant to be almost be like night vision.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain those. They're abstract, overexposed black and white chiaroscuro pieces with like synth music like kind of blaring over top of them.
Yeah, but the at any rate, the that visual style really helps to set the tone, because what you're shown is this ordinary life in a beautiful location of these people, told in a very plain manner with the occasional reference to the horrors being perpetrated nearby. Uh, and the only real effect that you see it having on the protagonist is not until the end of the movie, where he goes through like a very bureaucratic meeting with a bunch of other SS officers and like SS economists, where they're just like talking about train schedules, which is actually them talking about like the most efficient way to mass murder people.
Mm-hmm.
And he like throws up in the hallway, and then it shows people like cleaning the modern day Auschwitz. Are they cleaning the floor? Are they cleaning a mural? And then it just cuts back to him like descending the stairs and going back to work.
Yeah, the Auschwitz Birkenau Museum also be like a display case, like the glass. But yeah, he's I don't remember if you just said this, but he's walking down the stairs, like walking into darkness, which is how it ends.
Yeah, it's a really, I think, a really excellent way to handle the subject matter. A fascinating movie, a fascinating character study on some of the 20th century, if not the history's worst people, and one of the worst acts we've ever committed as a human race. But for Jonathan Glazer, I mean, it's just impressive for him to make a movie like this, which shares almost no stylistic similarities to the previous three.
Yeah.
And I think his attachment to the material is that he is Jewish, and so obviously, I think he had family that was killed during the Holocaust, and obviously that made him feel a bit more attracted to the project, and to be able to tell it in such a distinct way without the need to over dramatize anything or force the audience to witness something truly horrific, and then hold the audience accountable by not showing them anything horrific and being like, well, would you be like these people, able to just look away the way that the film looks away?
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think that all of those creative decisions operate twofold or maybe threefold. One of which is would you also be looking away? Would you also just try to lead a normal life while all of this is happening? but on the other sort of stream of that is that it's also asking of the audience in like a really gross way. It's not that the question is gross, but the answer I think is gross, which is, do you want to see what's happening? Do you feel the need to see this in order to get what's happening? And I think I don't want to speak for other people. I have no idea how they respond to not seeing the subject matter of the film, but I would guess that some people are very thrown off by not having like a spectacle or something shown for like shock value. That's not to say that like showing the horrors of war or of genocide. I'm not condemning anyone that does that in a film. I just think it's quite a creative choice that he is asking that question of people, is like, do you need to have this in order to feel emotion for this terrible aspect of humanity? And I think the answer is no, you don't, in order to get it. And its understatement is actually the biggest power of the movie, because that's the whole point, is, are you going to look away? Are you going to not focus on this and only focus on something that, sorry, I just got a crazy notification on my computer. um you're not going to focus on anything that is oh, I lost my train of thought. You
Hello?
still there?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Hello?
I can hear you.
You can?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I guess I'm back.
Okay.
Somebody didn't like what we were talking about. Someone was not happy.
So anyway, the zone of interest aspect could be interpreted in a number of ways, basically. That the zone, like, they're only interested in this specific zone that they are living in, and they're trying to basically like block out the other stuff that's happening, or only like the commandant who's thinking about how to efficiently execute people as efficiently as possible is only thinking about those people as like numbers. And so he's like more interested in, he's not even like that interested in his family, because he cheat on his wife.
He does, yeah.
Yeah. I'm losing my train of thought here. What's your interpretation of the title?
I mean, obviously, I think the zone of interest is meant to be that we're more interested in what we can't see. We're more interested in the horrors than we are in the life of the man perpetrating them, especially given that, there's been an inordinate amount of research, intellectualizing, and writing to try to not give excuse for, but find the reason why the Nazis were able to convince so many otherwise ordinary citizens to commit atrocities. Like, part of something that is not maybe explicitly referenced, but is implicitly referenced in the work, is that sort of banality of evil. I don't know
Hmm.
if you're too familiar with that concept or where it comes from.
You mean like the quote that evil happens when good men do nothing?
No. Like, are you familiar with the concept, the banality of evil?
I guess not.
Oh, it's uh,
Is it
uh,
like, is it a philosophical treatise? What is it?
no, it's like an extraordinarily famous phrase that has been used repeatedly to describe the the operation, typically of fascists, but more how fascist autocracies or autocracies in general are able to get the will of power over theirs to then commit atrocities for them. But it comes from a book called Eichmann in Jerusalem, which
Yeah, I see
basically
that.
describes the way in which Eichmann's like train scheduling and planning, which is shown in this film, was quite banal. It was quite straightforward. It was all about getting trains to move on time. There was nothing in that was inherently, this is the evil way, you know, the Austin Powers boardroom scene where they're planning some evil thing.
Yeah,
Like,
you're
they don't
saying that
come
the
out and openly say what they're doing.
yeah, I mean, uh I wouldn't necessarily say that I've heard this phrase before, but Yeah, I am familiar with the concept. Basically, what you're saying is that evil isn't going to take the form of the devil or something scary. It's going to take the form of something and just like general.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that. The intellectual literature has come to this conclusion over the last 80 years since the Holocaust happened. And I
Yeah.
think that that is the primary thing that this movie wants to show, rather than dramatizing the events in the way that other movies very explicitly have done. Pieces of trash like The Boy in the Striped Pajamas is a good that. A movie that exists purely to profit off of the horrors of concentration camps, as opposed to, trying to say something about them or asking the audience to participate in questions and think about why it's occurred, which is clearly Glazer's intention with making something like this. This is not like a film that is meant to be entertaining in the same way that Under the Skin has all of these, moments that otherwise we would associate with something like an erotic thriller that instead is shown in a rather objective manner, but shot so stylistically that we're forced to be entranced by it as opposed to looking away. Whereas this film doesn't let us look away because the film itself looks away.
Yeah, and it's like circumnavigating the concentration camp itself.
Yeah, and so you're by taking that perspective and then showing the same people who would look away, I think it sort of highlights that and is one of the best fictitious examples of displaying that one of the central ideas in that Eichmann work.
Yeah, further emphasizing that like another idea is that the zone of interest is the Holocaust, but also just genocides in general, where people in retrospect look back and they're like, how could this possibly happen? And the answer, as you're saying, is the banality of evil.
Right. Partially. I mean, I guess if you were to watch The Zone of Interest and didn't get a lot out of it, but you're interested in learning more about the Holocaust, it would be worth reading Eichmann in Jerusalem to better understand. And certainly moving away from and never watching something like The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, never even hopefully thinking about that, something horrible like that again.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess you're getting at a larger sort of perspective that we probably will continue to reference on this podcast, which is that if a work is simply meant to profit, especially off of something as horrific as the Holocaust, then that villainous at best. But also the other thing that I would hold The Boy in the Striped Pajamas feet to the fire for is that it literally is just like trying to evoke people in the audience to just say, wow, wasn't that sad? Like that's like the most basic sort of surface level it's going for.
Well, it's more insidious than that because it shows you the framing narrative through the eyes of children. So it's meant to take on more of a role of, something like Pan's Labyrinth, minus the, fantastical elements, and instead just meant to be the relationship between these two kids, and then serves Asa Butterfield's character, making a sacrifice or whatever the ending of that movie is meant to say.
Well, it was sad because of the cruel irony that happens. That
All the other dead people, not sad. This poor kid, sad.
right.
Is that what I was supposed to learn from Boy in the Striped Pajamas? I
No,
don't.
no, no, you did too much thinking with that movie. We got to get back to the zone of interest. You gotta put the interest back on it.
I mean, these are related. It's directly related. The zone
No,
of
I
interest
know.
may as well be just a response to something like that. I
It
mean,
might be.
Jonathan Glazer won the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, which is a weird category for this to win. But I don't. Ignoring the Oscars and their choices aside, in his acceptance speech for the award, he talked about dehumanization and the way in which he sees similar events happening from what happened in the Holocaust to what's happening in Gaza, or what was happening in Gaza since as of the recording of this, conflict there is in a winding down movement, I suppose. Inevitably or invariably, there will likely be more conflict in that region again in our lifetimes.
Seems to be just a pause.
Right. But then he was condemned by like thousands of Jews in Hollywood for saying that that was insensitive and it was blood libel and it made light of the Holocaust for relating the two events, which, points to, I think, the strength of Glazer's work in the zone of interest because, I think it speaks for itself, the fact that he would relate it to another modern day set of atrocities aside and the politicization of those atrocities,
The cruel irony that people who were genocided in World War II in concentration camps now are being involved in another genocide, but they're on the other side of it now.
Well, we can't get too into that because it's a complicated issue and we're not here to talk about politics just yet. This will become a political show soon enough. Don't you worry.
There will be plenty of time for that. But long story short, Jonathan Glazer, he's got some music videos Nolan doesn't recommend. He's got some adverts, which I would pretty safely say that we would recommend all of them for quite different experiences. Go ahead.
So where can people reach out to us? Where can people submit complaints or notes?
Notes.
Yeah, well, I'm missing because I know I
messed up here. I shouldn't have mentioned his
You shouldn't have. No.
Damn it. Oh, the email. They can submit to the email, or we can just start a forum. We can just post a forum.
Yeah, shoot me an email at flockaseagle@gmail.com. That's Flocka, FLOCKA, Seagle, SEAGLE @gmail.com. Flocka Seagle.
How did you spell seagull?
SEAGLE.
No, that's not how you spell that word, sir. God damn it.
Oh, I know about gulls. You think I'm uninitiated with fowl? I know about gull, GULL. It's spelled the good way.
Jonathan Glazer, 4 movies. You should watch them.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's a great director. I don't know how old he is. Oh, it looks like he's almost 60. Hopefully he's got more work in him. Obviously, he's made 4 films in 20 years and he's been doing intermittently more commercial work in the meantime. Not as much in the music video sphere, which I'm fine with. I have to imagine once you win an Oscar for like best movie, even if it's best foreign language movie, Hollywood financiers will line up behind you and go, okay, you made a winner, so now you get to make what you want. And given that he's already made these 4 very different movies with clearly no censorship behind them for whatever he wants to do, hopefully it means, in the next couple of years he puts out some really artistic work. But
I sure as hell hope so. I mean, it's encouraging also that this was his latest film, and I would rather he spend time doing whatever he wants as opposed to just pumping out mediocre movies. Like, I'd rather have these 4 movies than like 10 movies and 6 of them are just like, they're just mid.
Yeah,
but yeah.
I guess the way he's gotten around the like one for me, one for you model is just by being a successful commercial director. But it's not as if the commercials he's directed, other than directly shilling for a product, are like commercial in nature. Like they're not like that Surfer one for Guinness is not like, it's not like advertising like a normal lifestyle you would associate with Guinness. It's just like an insane ad, and then at the end it's like, drink Guinness.
It is quite jarring. It's not really related at all.
Nor need it be, evidently.
All right. Till next time, everyone. Hasta luego.